The phone rang at exactly 3:17 a.m. Not buzzed, not vibrated. It rang, loud, sharp, violent. The kind of sound that doesn't ask for permission before ripping you out of sleep. I was already half awake, the way parents learn to be once their children grow up and leave home. When silence itself feels suspicious. When every creak in the house sounds like a footstep, and every shadow feels like a memory trying to crawl back. The room was dark, October cold pressed against the windows like it wanted inside. Somewhere outside, the wind dragged dead leaves across the pavement, whispering secrets it had no business knowing. The ringtone cut through the darkness. Sunflower Skies, Emily's favorite song. A slowed-down piano version she had set years ago, back when she was 15 and believed playlists could save the world. The melody sounded wrong at this hour. Too sad, too slow, like a goodbye pretending to be a song. My hand found the phone before my eyes opened. The screen glowed. Emmy Bear. My heart dropped. No one calls their father at 3:17 in the morning unless something is broken or bleeding. "Dad?" she whispered. Her voice shook like glass about to shatter. "I'm at the police station." I sat up so fast the room spun. "What happened?" I asked, already swinging my legs off the bed. "My stepfather beat me," she said, "but now he's telling them that I attacked him." There was a pause. "They believe him." Those 3 words hit harder than any punch I'd ever taken. I was already pulling on jeans, the phone pinned between my shoulder and ear. "Listen to me, Emily," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm, even as something hot and violent climbed up my spine. "I'm coming. Don't say another word until I'm there. Not one. Do you hear me?" "I tried to fight back," she sobbed. "He's bigger than me, Dad. And the officers, they're looking at me like I'm the problem." Her breath hitched. "There's blood on my hoodie. My hoodie!" That hoodie. The one she stole from my closet last summer. Navy blue. Faded letters across the chest. Property of Dad. "Please hurry," she whispered. The line went dead. I stared at the screen. 3:19 a.m. For half a second, the house felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath. Then training kicked in. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, and the old leather jacket hanging by the door, the one I hadn't worn since retirement. Frayed cuffs, heavy shoulders, still faintly smelling of gun oil and cold nights. The truck roared to life before I fully shut the door. The streets were empty, slick with rain, traffic lights blinking red like open wounds. Every stoplight felt personal, every second stretched too long. Richard. Of course it was Richard. My ex-wife's husband of 4 years. Smooth talker, expensive watches, a laugh that never reached his eyes. The kind of man who smiled while calculating how much damage he could get away with. I remembered the first time Emily told me she didn't like him. "She's just going through a phase," he'd said later, smiling politely, like he was talking about a broken appliance instead of my daughter. I'd wanted to believe Lisa when she said he was good for them. Wanted to believe Emily was safe in that house while I worked double shifts at the security firm, telling myself retirement would mean peace. What a fool I'd been. The Midtown precinct appeared ahead, glowing harsh and white against the dark like a hospital for broken truths. I parked crooked across 2 spaces. Didn't care. Inside, the air smelled like burnt coffee, bleach, and something metallic underneath. Blood. Fear. Maybe both. Sergeant Mallory looked up from the desk. Her eyes widened. "Harlan," she said quietly. "Retired detective. Badge 4729, still in the system." She didn't stop me, just nodded toward the holding area, her expression tight with something that looked like regret. Emily sat on a metal bench in the corner. One wrist was cuffed to the rail with a plastic zip tie, already biting red into her skin. Her knees were pulled to her chest, like she was trying to disappear into herself. A bruise the color of rotten plums bloomed across her cheekbone. Her right eye was swelling shut. Dried blood clung above her eyebrow in a jagged line. She was wearing my hoodie, torn at the sleeve, dark stains at the collar. When she saw me, her face crumpled. "Dad!" She tried to stand. The zip tie snapped her back. Across the room stood Richard Lang, 6'2", broad shoulders, perfectly styled hair, a split lip and a shallow scratch along his jaw, just enough to look like a victim. He leaned against the counter, arms folded, smirking, the same smirk he'd worn at our last barbecue when he told Emily to smile more because pretty girls shouldn't scowl. A young officer stepped toward me, badge read J. Carter, early 20s, baby-faced, nervous. The color drained from his face when he recognized me. I'm sorry, Mr. Harlan," he stammered. "I didn't know." Didn't know what? That I was her father? That I'd spent 22 years putting men like Richard in prison? That this wasn't over? I looked at Emily, then at the zip tie. "Cut it," I said. Carter hesitated. Another officer stepped forward. Ramirez. Academy days. Sharp eyes. No nonsense. She pulled a blade and sliced the plastic in one clean motion. Emily ran into my arms. And that was when I realized this night was only beginning. Emily's body shook against mine like she was standing in the middle of a storm only she could see. Her hands clutched the back of my jacket, fingers digging in as if letting go might make her disappear. I felt how light she was. Too light. Fear does that to people. It hollows them out. "I'm here," I whispered, pressing my forehead to the top of her head. "I've got you." She nodded, but her breathing stayed fast and shallow, like she was afraid the air itself might hurt her. I pulled back slowly, keeping my hands on her shoulders so she wouldn't feel abandoned even for a second. Under the fluorescent lights, the damage was worse than I'd thought. Finger-shaped bruises wrapped around her upper arms, dark and angry. Her lip was split in 2 places. The cut above her eyebrow had started bleeding again. Every mark told a story, and none of them matched Richard's. "I didn't do anything," she whispered, her voice barely holding together. "I swear, Dad." "I know," I said. I didn't say it like comfort. I said it like fact. Richard cleared his throat behind us. "She came at me," he said smoothly. "I was defending myself. You know how kids get these days. Emotional, unstable." I turned slowly. He stood relaxed, hands open, playing the role perfectly. The poor man attacked in his own home. The loving stepfather pushed too far. I had arrested men like him for decades. Men who believed confidence could replace truth. "Where did this happen?" I asked, not looking at him. Richard smiled. "The kitchen." She lost control. Emily's shoulders stiffened. I felt it instantly. "He grabbed my hair," she said, louder now, anger breaking through the fear. "He slammed my face into the counter 3 times. I was trying to get to the door." "That's enough," Carter said quickly, glancing between us like he was standing between 2 loaded guns. "Let's move this to an interview room." The room they led us into was small and windowless. 1 table, 4 chairs, a camera blinking red in the corner. The walls were painted a color that tried too hard to be neutral. Emily sat beside me. Richard took the chair across the table. Ramirez leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Carter sat down last, hands trembling slightly as he opened his folder. "Let's go over statements again," he said. "Mr. Lang, you first." Richard sighed heavily, rubbing his temples like a man exhausted by injustice. "She's been acting strange for weeks," he began. "Mood swings, anger. I asked her to clean up after dinner and she just snapped. She grabbed a knife from the counter and came at me." Emily shook her head violently. "That's not true." "She scratched my face," Richard continued, lifting his chin to display the shallow mark. "I tried to restrain her. That's when she must have gotten hurt." I watched him closely. No hesitation, no cracks, just performance. "And the blood on her clothes?" Carter asked. "She must have cut herself," Richard said, "to make it look worse." Emily laughed. It came out sharp and broken. "You're lying," she said. "You know you're lying." Carter swallowed hard. "Emily," he said gently, "it's your turn." She took a breath, then another. "When my mom went to bed, he started yelling," she said. "Said I was disrespectful. Said I was just like my father." I felt that one hit my chest like a hammer. "He grabbed my hoodie," she continued, voice steady now. "Pushed me into the counter. I tried to run. He pulled my hair and slammed my head down. I screamed. I tried to call 911. Her eyes flicked to Richard. "That's when he hit me again." Silence filled the room. The camera hummed. Carter didn't look up. "Mr. Harlan," he said quietly, "there's something you should know." He slid his phone across the table. "We recovered audio from Emily's phone. It started recording when she dialed 911. Richard straightened. "That doesn't prove anything," he said quickly. "Audio can be edited. AI does crazy things now." Carter pressed play. Emily's scream filled the room. Not acted, not controlled. Pure terror. "Please," her voice cried from the speaker. "He's hurting me. Please hurry, he won't stop." A crash, a thud, then silence. Richard's face went pale. The smirk was gone. "That's out of context," he said. "You can't prove—" "There's more," Carter interrupted. He flipped a page in his folder. "When we ran your background, Mr. Lang, 3 domestic complaints showed up. 2 states, similar stories." Richard stood abruptly. "Those were lies." "And," Carter continued, his voice gaining strength, "there's something else. Your brother, Tommy Lang." Richard froze. I leaned back in my chair. 15 years vanished in an instant. A gas station robbery. Grainy footage. A young man with wild eyes and a pistol shaking in his hand. Tommy Lang had sworn revenge in open court. "I'll make you pay," he'd yelled at me as they dragged him away. Carter looked between Richard and me. "Mr. Lang," he said, "your stepdaughter's statement, the audio, and your history are not aligning." Ramirez pushed off the wall. "I think we need to change how we're treating this case," she said flatly. Richard's jaw tightened. For the first time, fear cracked through his confidence. And I knew the truth had finally entered the room. The room felt smaller after the audio ended, not because the walls moved, but because the truth had taken up space. Heavy space. The kind that presses against your lungs and makes every breath feel like a decision. Richard Lang sat frozen, his hands gripping the edge of the table. The smooth confidence he had walked in with was gone. What remained was a man doing math in his head, counting exits, measuring risk. Emily leaned closer to me. I felt her fingers curl into my sleeve. "I didn't lie," she whispered. "I know," I said again. Carter cleared his throat. His hands were steadier now. The fear he'd shown earlier had turned into something else. Determination, sharpened by responsibility. "Mr. Lang," he said, "based on the evidence we have so far, we're reclassifying this as a domestic violence investigation." Richard scoffed, but it sounded forced. "You can't just do that." "We can," Ramirez said, "and we are." She stepped forward and gently guided Emily out of the room. "Medical needs to look at you," she said softly. "I'll stay with you." Emily hesitated, eyes locked on mine. "Go," I told her. "I'm not leaving." When the door closed behind them, the air shifted again. Just me, Carter, and Richard. Richard leaned back, forcing a laugh. "You cops love drama. This will all blow over." I met his eyes. "Your brother said the same thing," I replied. That did it. Something ugly flashed across his face. Rage. Recognition. Old hatred resurfacing like a scar ripped open. "You ruined my family," he said quietly. "Tommy wouldn't have turned out that way if it weren't for you." I stood slowly. "Your brother put a gun to a clerk's head for $43, I said. "I didn't make him pull the trigger." Richard slammed his hand on the table. You think you're some hero?" "No," I said, "but I know a liar when I see one." Carter watched silently, eyes moving between us, learning something they didn't teach at the academy. Richard exhaled sharply, rubbing his face. "Fine. Maybe I lost my temper, but she provoked me." I felt my jaw tighten. "You don't get to say that," I said. "Not now. Not ever." The door opened again. Ramirez returned alone. "Medical confirmed," she said. "Her injuries are consistent with assault, not self-defense." Richard's shoulders sagged. Carter closed his folder. "Mr. Lang, at this time, you are no longer considered the victim in this incident." The words landed like a sentence. "You're placing me under arrest?" Richard demanded. "For domestic assault," Carter replied, "and false reporting." I watched the cuffs close around his wrists. Cold metal. Final. As they led him past me, Richard leaned close and whispered, "This isn't over." I didn't flinch. "For you," I said, "it is." Later, as dawn crept through the station windows, Emily sat beside me, wrapped in a blanket. Her face was cleaned, the bruises remained, but her eyes were clearer. "Dad," she said quietly, "I was scared they'd believe him." "They almost did," I admitted, "but they didn't." She nodded, leaning her head on my shoulder. Outside, the sky began to change color, and for the first time that night, I allowed myself to believe justice might actually win. The sun was barely up when we left the station. Morning light spilled across the parking lot like it didn't know what kind of night had just happened. Cars passed. People went to work. The world moved forward, careless and unchanged. Emily walked beside me slowly, wrapped in a gray police blanket that smelled faintly of detergent and old coffee. Each step looked like it took effort, not because her body was weak, but because trust was. I opened the truck door for her. She paused before getting in. "Dad," she said, staring at the ground, "what's going to happen now?" I wished I could lie. "There will be questions," I said. "Court dates, statements, people who think they know better than they do." She nodded. "And Mom?" That one hurt. "She hasn't called," I said carefully. Emily's mouth tightened. She climbed into the truck without another word. The drive home was quiet. Not uncomfortable. Heavy. The kind of silence where every thought feels too loud to say out loud. By noon, the story was already moving. Domestic dispute at Midtown Precinct. Former detective involved. Teenage girl hospitalized. Reporters loved patterns. Loved drama. They didn't love truth. Lisa called that afternoon. Her voice was thin, stretched tight like wire. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I almost laughed. "She was calling 911, I said. "That should have told you enough." There was a pause. "He said she attacked him," Lisa whispered. And there it was, the silence between us. "Did you see her face?" I asked. "Did you see her arms?" "I don't know what to believe," she said. I closed my eyes. "I do." The court hearing was scheduled for the following week. Emily stayed with me, slept on the couch. Nightmares came in waves. Some nights she cried. Some nights she didn't sleep at all. I sat up with her every time. The courtroom smelled like old wood and tired promises. Richard stood in a clean suit, bruises fading, confidence slowly rebuilding. Emily took the stand. Her voice shook at first, then it steadied. She told the truth, every word. When it was over, the judge didn't look at Richard. He looked at me, then at Emily. "Enough," he said. The gavel came down, and the silence finally broke. The courtroom emptied slowly. Wooden benches creaked as people stood, whispers floating like dust in the air. Reporters rushed for the doors, already shaping headlines before the truth had time to breathe. Emily stayed seated. Her hands were folded in her lap, knuckles pale, shoulders stiff like she was waiting for another blow that never came. I sat beside her, close enough that she could feel me there without needing to look. Richard didn't look back as they led him away. Not once. The man who had once filled every room with noise and charm now moved silently, escorted by officers who didn't smile, didn't hurry, didn't care who he thought he was. His power had vanished the moment the judge spoke. Outside, cameras flashed. "Mr. Harlan!" someone shouted. "Do you believe justice was served?" I stepped in front of Emily without thinking. "No," I said calmly. "Justice doesn't make you whole again. It just stops the bleeding." That night, Lisa came to my house. She stood at the door for a long time before knocking. When I opened it, she looked smaller than I remembered. No makeup, no confidence, just a woman carrying too many wrong choices. "I didn't know," she said immediately. Emily appeared behind me. "You didn't want to know," she replied. The words cut clean. Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "I believed him." Emily nodded. "That's what hurts." Lisa reached out. Emily stepped back, and in that space between them, everything became clear. Later, after Lisa left, Emily sat beside me on the couch. "Dad," she said quietly, "I don't think I can forgive her. Not yet." "You don't have to," I said. "Healing isn't a deadline." She leaned her head on my shoulder. Outside, the wind carried away fallen leaves. Inside, something broken had finally stopped breaking. And I made a promise, to myself and to my daughter. No one would ever silence her again. Healing didn't arrive all at once. It came in pieces. Some mornings, Emily woke up almost normal. She made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, scrolled through her phone like the world hadn't cracked open. Other mornings, she froze at the sound of a door closing too hard, or flinched when someone raised their voice on television. I learned the signs: the tight shoulders, the distant eyes, the way she held her breath without realizing it. We started with small things: short walks around the block, late-night movies with the volume low, silence that didn't ask questions. One afternoon, she found the hoodie, my hoodie, folded on the chair in the living room. She picked it up, turning it over in her hands, fingers tracing the faded letters across the chest. "I should throw this away," she said. "You don't have to," I replied. She held it for a long time, then shook her head. "Not yet." That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment I had missed, every warning sign I'd ignored, every excuse I'd accepted because it was easier than fighting. I'd spent my life protecting strangers, and still failed my own child. Retirement had made me soft, I told myself, less alert, less present. But the truth was harder. I trusted the wrong people. And trust has consequences. Emily started therapy the following week. I sat in the car the first time, hands gripping the steering wheel, fighting the urge to storm inside and demand answers I couldn't fix. When she came out, her eyes were red, but her posture was straighter. "It's exhausting," she said, "but it helps." That was enough. One evening, she surprised me. "Dad," she said, standing in the doorway of my study, "can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Were you scared that night?" I paused. "Yes," I admitted. "Terrified." She nodded. "Me too." We shared that truth quietly, not as weakness, as connection. Outside, the world kept spinning. Inside, we were learning how to breathe again. Lisa asked to meet on a Sunday afternoon. Neutral place, she said, a cafe near the river, somewhere public, somewhere safe. Emily thought about it for a long time before agreeing. "I won't stay long," she said, "and I won't pretend." "I wouldn't want you to," I replied. The cafe smelled like burnt espresso and cinnamon. Soft music played in the background, the kind meant to calm nerves. It didn't work. Lisa was already there, sitting by the window. She looked older, not in years, but in weight. Guilt does that. It settles into your bones. When Emily walked in, Lisa stood up too fast, knocking her chair back. "Hi," she said. Emily nodded, nothing more. They sat. Silence stretched between them like a wire pulled too tight. "I should have listened," Lisa said finally. "I should have protected you." Emily stirred her coffee slowly. "You protected him." Lisa flinched. "I was afraid to be alone," she whispered. "And I chose wrong." Emily looked up then. Her eyes were steady, clear. "That choice almost destroyed me." Lisa's tears fell freely now. "I'm so sorry." "I know," Emily said, "but sorry doesn't erase what happened." They talked for 20 minutes, not yelling, not forgiving, just truth. When Emily stood to leave, Lisa reached out. Emily stepped back. "Maybe one day," she said, "but not today." Outside, the river moved calmly, unaware of human damage. Emily breathed deeply. "I feel lighter," she said. I nodded. She was no longer a victim. She was a survivor, choosing herself. Weeks passed. Emily's steps grew steadier. The shadows in her room didn't seem to follow her anymore. Each day she left for school on her own, backpack slung low, eyes alert but unafraid. One afternoon she came home and slammed the door shut, not in anger, but in triumph. "I told him off," she said, fists on her hips. "That kid at school who thought he could push me around? I told him exactly what I think of bullies." I laughed softly. "Sounds like my daughter." Her eyes sparkled. "I am your daughter." We shared a small smile, one of those moments that repairs invisible cracks. But the outside world wasn't done testing her yet. Richard Lang's attorney called. Threats, legal games, false claims. They were trying to intimidate Emily into silence. I listened calmly, knowing exactly what needed to happen. "Emily," I said, "you don't have to answer anything without me. We follow the law, not their lies." She nodded, a quiet confidence settling into her shoulders. The night Richard tried to contact her directly, we were ready. "Blocked," she whispered, a faint grin on her face. "And I changed all my passwords." I put my hand on her shoulder. "Good. We don't negotiate with threats." Weeks later, in court, Richard attempted one final manipulation. He claimed she had provoked him, that her injuries were exaggerated, but Emily walked in holding her head high. Her therapist had prepared her, and I had coached her through every question. Every lie he tried to spin fell apart under her calm, unwavering truth. The judge listened. The prosecutor presented every piece of evidence, the audio recording, her statements, his history, and his prior arrests. And for the first time in that courtroom, Richard had no words. I watched Emily from the gallery. She wasn't afraid anymore, not of him, not of anyone who tried to erase her truth. When the gavel finally struck, ending the case in her favor, Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Outside the courthouse, she hugged me tightly. "I did it," she whispered. "No," I said. "You survived it. That's different. That's stronger." Richard Lang walked past, escorted by officers. His smirk was gone. The calculated mask he wore for years shattered, leaving only a hollow man who underestimated the resilience of a child he tried to break. Emily watched him go. Her fists were still clenched, but her face was calm. "You'll never scare me again," she said quietly, and I believed her. The last time Richard Lang tried to appear in our lives, it was in court. He had expected fear, submission, tears. Instead, he found Emily standing taller than he ever imagined possible. The judge read the final verdict: domestic assault, false reporting, harassment, all charges upheld, no bail, no parole, just consequences. Richard's face went pale as his lawyer whispered what the paperwork meant. Emily didn't flinch, not once. "Your Honor," she said, voice steady, "I didn't attack him. I survived him. And I'm done being afraid." The courtroom went silent. You could hear the scratch of a pen, the shuffle of papers, the faint hum of the air conditioner. Richard's smirk had vanished. He looked smaller, thinner somehow, like the weight of his lies had finally caught up. When the gavel hit the desk for the last time, he was escorted away. No final words, no threats, just the echo of the truth behind him. Outside the courthouse, the air smelled like rain and asphalt. Crowds moved past, oblivious to the small war that had just ended. Emily turned to me, eyes bright, lips curved into a real smile. "I did it," she said. "You survived it," I corrected, gripping her shoulder. "And that's stronger than anything he could ever do." We walked to the truck, side by side. No need for words. Silence was enough. At home, Emily finally unpacked the backpack she hadn't touched since the night of the attack. Every book, every notebook, every piece of her life she thought had been ruined, she handled with care. She pulled out my hoodie, folded it neatly, placed it on her bed. "It's still mine," she said softly, "but it doesn't own me anymore." Later that night, we sat in the living room. The lights were low. The only sound was the hum of the heater and the soft crackle of a small fire I had lit. Emily rested her head on my shoulder. "I'm scared of nothing now," she said, almost in a whisper. "You should be proud," I told her, "because you learned how to fight without giving up yourself." Outside, the wind swept through the trees. Somewhere, a leaf fell. The world kept moving. Inside, something broken had finally healed. Not perfectly, not quickly, but completely enough to carry on. And as I watched my daughter, strong and unbroken, I realized this night, these weeks, these months, they hadn't just been about survival. They had been about reclaiming life, reclaiming power, reclaiming each other. And nothing, not Richard, not fear, not betrayal, could take that away from us again. The first morning after the court case felt like a new world. Sunlight poured through the windows, cutting through the shadows that had clung to the corners of our home for months. The air smelled like possibility, fresh coffee, warm sheets, and a hint of the city waking up. Emily was in the kitchen, pouring cereal into a bowl with deliberate calm, no fear in her movements, no hesitation, just control. I leaned against the doorway, watching her, feeling the weight of everything behind us lift slightly. "You're quiet," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "I'm just watching," I admitted. "You've grown a lot in the past few weeks." She smirked, a tiny spark of mischief returning. "I had to. You can't protect me from everything forever." "No," I said, "but I can remind you that you're never alone." The hoodie was folded neatly on her bed, a small reminder that even the past, bruised and torn, could be contained, controlled, understood. The world outside remained indifferent. People walked past our house, cars honked, life carried on. But inside, we had rebuilt something sacred: trust, safety, and courage. Emily packed her backpack for school. No hesitation, no fear, just routine. As she walked to the door, she paused and looked at me. "Dad," she said softly, "thank you for not giving up on me, for believing me when no one else did." I smiled, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, pride, pure and quiet. "You don't have to thank me," I said. "You fought too. You survived. And you taught me something I almost forgot. Courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about moving forward even when fear is louder than your heart." She stepped outside, the sun casting long shadows behind her, and for the first time, I let her walk on her own. Not because I didn't care, but because she was ready. Later that evening, we sat on the porch, sipping tea. The city lights flickered in the distance, and the sounds of life returned. A dog barking, a car door slamming, laughter echoing somewhere far off. Emily rested her head on my shoulder again. "I think I can breathe now," she whispered. "Yes," I said, "and this time, you own every breath." We didn't talk about Richard. We didn't need to. His threats, his lies, his attempts at control had ended. Justice had been served, but more importantly, we had survived together. And in that survival, we found freedom. The hoodie remained folded on the bed. The scars on Emily's arms faded slowly. The bruises left marks on memory, not on spirit. We had been through darkness, and yet, here we were, alive, whole, stronger than ever. And as the stars appeared above, tiny points of light in the vast night sky, I realized something simple, yet profound. No one could take away her courage. No one could take away her truth. And no matter what the world tried next, we would face it together. Because the night that had begun in fear had ended in strength, and a new dawn had arrived.